They're meeting in Geneva to talk politics, but the Syrian government and opposition are stuck on how to get much-needed aid into the besieged city of Homs. Is a comprehensive deal possible, and how would it be implemented on the ground? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to Inside Story. I'm Adrian Finnegan. Talks continue in Geneva to end the stalemate in Syria, but there's little sign of any progress on the core issue of whether Bashar al-Assad will stay in power or not. Away from the politics, there's also been a focus on Syria's humanitarian disaster. More than 100,000 people have been killed in the conflict so far. Almost 2.5 million people have been displaced to neighbouring countries. But it's of course inside Syria where the conflict has taken its biggest toll. 6.5 million Syrians have been internally displaced. And on Sunday, the talks yielded some hope for civilians in one Syrian city, with a deal on the safe passage of civilians. Homs. A city under siege, where hundreds of people have been trapped for months. In a first tentative sign of progress at the internationally brokered talks in Geneva, the Syrian government agreed that women and children could leave the city, but accuses rebels of standing in their way.
I assure you that now, at this moment, as this second, if the armed groups, if the terrorists in the city of Homs allow these children and women to move and to leave the old city of Homs, we shall allow them immediately every access, and not only that, we shall provide them with shelter, we shall provide them with medicine, and we shall provide them with all the needed necessities for their daily life.
Homs is in a strategic location, and it's witnessed a fierce, continuing battle between government and rebel troops. Government forces retook much of the surrounding area last year, leaving rebels in the old city under siege, along with hundreds of civilians. The government wants a list of names of all adult men who want to leave, suspecting that many belong to armed groups. In exchange, the opposition wants the release of prisoners in government detention. UN and Arab League mediator Lakhdar Brahimi, the man shuttling between the two sides in Geneva, acknowledged that the confidence-building measure fell well short of hopes to send a humanitarian convoy into Homs. But it's a start.
Don't run before you can walk. And we are just learning to walk.
The problem is, both sides are suspicious of each other's motives.
Tomorrow, we'll start talking about transition from dictatorship to democracy. Clearly, the regime is not enthusiastic to talk about that, and they are stalling, wall stalling. They are trying to use delay tactics, trying to go into details about information that can't be verified. They are asking about names, a list of names of people who were blockaded rather than providing humanitarian corridors.
And it's this lack of trust that makes even the task of easing the plight of civilians trapped by fighting far from straightforward. All right, so let's bring in our guests today. From Geneva, we're joined by Monza Akbik, spokesman for the Syrian National Coalition. Also from Geneva, we're joined by Robert Mardini, head of operations for the Near and Middle East at the International Committee of the Red Cross. And from London, we're joined by Fawaz Gerges, who gets the best deal today because he's in the warm, Professor of Middle Eastern Politics at the London School of Economics. Gentlemen, welcome to you all. Before we begin our discussion, I just want to play you an extract from an interview my colleague James Bays did with President Assad's advisor, Bouthena Shaban, who appeared to dismiss the importance of humanitarian aid to Homs.
These people who are sitting here seem to have really nothing to count on. So they are trying to count on some very, very small issue about humanitarian assistance.
It's not a small issue. There are people starving on that.
Excuse me. whole Syria, we have a program for the entire Syria with the Red Cross, with the Red Crescent, with UN agencies. And every day humanitarian assistance, food and medicine is delivered to everywhere in Syria. This is to make a big fuss about taking 2 trolleys to Homs with our respect. I'm from Homs, you know, with our respect to every single person in Homs. It seems that they have nothing except to try and to create some credibility through saying we took some trucks to Homs. Is this why we are in Geneva? Is this why we came to Geneva, or we came here to solve the problem in Syria?
You say it's a minor issue. Tell us, though, on what you say is a minor issue, why the Syrian government has not given that go-ahead
That's
to
not
get
true.
that
The
convoy.
Syrian government is the one who is working with the Red Cross and the Red Crescent for weeks. But what I'm saying is that they're raising it here to show the world as if they are the ones who are sending humanitarian assistance. They have nothing to do with it. This is going on with them in Geneva or them being in Washington or in Istanbul. But they are trying to create some credibility for themselves through raising this issue now in Geneva.
Can I ask you, what is the point of your delegation being here if you are not prepared to make concessions on the rule of President Assad? Because this is supposed to be about a new transitional government.
The war is not about President Assad. It's not about the system. The war is about Syria. What is important for us as a delegation is Syria and the 23 million Syrian people. The point of our being here is to solve the problem, to restore the refugees, to restore the displaced, and to rebuild Syria as the Syrian people wanted. One crucial difference between us, who are very proud Syrian, and between those who want Western powers to do whatever they like in Syria. This is the crux of the issue.
Let's put that straight to the Red Cross. Robert Mardini, what access is the Syrian government giving you to people in need of aid and medical assistance right now in Syria?
Well, our reading of the humanitarian situation in Syria 3 years after this conflict started is nothing short of catastrophic. And for us, there is a widening gap between the needs of Syrians and the overall capacity response. It is a very challenging situation. People are being killed and injured every day. People are being detained or gone missing. Hundreds and thousands of people are being on the move every day as frontline shift. And this trends persist. People are leaving the country, as you know, and I think whatever will happen from now on, the conflict will be remembered for its blatant disrespect of and the violence against health facilities, health personnel, ambulances, Syrian Red Crescent volunteers. During my visit 2 weeks ago to Syria, the 34th Syrian Red Crescent volunteers was killed while on duty. And I think this is a matter of grave concern for us.
Okay.
And there is a need for concrete action.
I just wanted to get to the bottom of what the president's spokesperson there, the advisor to the president, was saying when she was arguing that the Syrian government is giving the Red Cross assistance, that it's giving you the access you need to deliver the humanitarian aid to people in most need of it. And is that right?
Well, let me give you our independent reading. Today, together with Syrian Red Crescent volunteers, we are able to work in many parts of the country. If I take the example of our water and sanitation program, today we can say without shying that this program is benefiting to all the population in all 14 governorates. And we work hand in hand with the local engineers, contractors, and we are able really to make significant impact in terms of public health, because as you know, water and sanitation is the basics for public health. In terms of food, we can of course do better, but we are able to feed, together with the Syrian Red Crescent, 3.5 million persons in 2013. But we have to acknowledge that the most challenging part of our work is the medical program, and here we are really disappointed with what we are with our health program, because we are not able to deliver in an impartial way medical supplies, surgical supplies wherever the needs are.
Okay.
And the biggest challenges for us today are areas that are besieged, whether by government forces or armed opposition groups.
All right, well, let's get back to the siege of Homs. Monza Akbik, spokesman for the Syrian National Coalition. The ball's in your court now, isn't it? Provide this list of names and the siege of Homs will be over.
The siege of Homs was promised to be over. There were 12 trucks of food of Red Crescent waiting to enter old city of Homs. We were expecting yesterday that they will enter there. Assad regime did not allow them. Today we waited, maybe there should be some progress about this matter. Nothing happened so far. As of this moment, the food did not enter old city of Homs because it's blocked by the Assad forces.
Farmers Georges in London, this list of names that the Syrian government has asked for before it will allow men to leave the city. I mean, apart from the dangers of the parallels with Srebrenica here, what is the government up to? Is it looking for excuses not to end the siege by asking for a list of names which surely the opposition can't provide?
Well, I think the Syrian government strategy is basically it wants to make sure that none of the armed rebels is allowed to leave Homs. This is point one. And point two, the Syrian government knows very well that many civilians would not really like to provide their names to the Syrian government in the first place because some civilians were arrested and incarcerated when they tried to leave some areas, other areas in Syria, in particular in Damascus. Let me focus on the crux of the matter. I mean, the bigger question, humanitarian questions and the Syrian government response. The Syrian government is coming under tremendous pressure to allow humanitarian access and to release prisoners. In fact, the Russian foreign minister has just made it very clear. He called on both sides to unblock the siege and exchange prisoners. My humble reading, is that I don't think we should expect the Syrian government to make any major concessions on humanitarian questions. And the question is why? Why will the Syrian government not really make? Because I think the Syrian government views humanitarian questions as an extension of the war against the armed rebels. In fact, the Syrian government has used the policy of siege and food in order to break the will, to break the backbone of the armed rebels and to drive a wedge between what it called al-Hadina al-Sha'biyya, the social base and the armed rebels. And that's why I don't think we should expect any major concessions on the part of the Syrian government. And as you heard, I think the Syrian government, Buthayna Shu'ban, told your correspondent, well, look, we're not going to give the Syrian National Coalition, the delegation of the Syrian National Coalition, any credit for basically any major moves in Homs, because this is not what we're here for, and this tells you about the overall strategy of the Syrian delegation.
But she is right, surely, isn't she, when she says that this issue, this humanitarian issue in Homs is a distraction from the real issues here that they're there to discuss in Geneva. It's a matter for the Red Cross, the Red Crescent, and not the political representatives who are trying to thrash out a deal there in Geneva.
Well, yes and no. I think the whole idea of focusing on humanitarian questions is to build confidence-building measures between the opposition and the government, and also to improve the quality of life. I mean, you have a humanitarian catastrophe. You're talking about Damascus, you're talking about Homs, you're talking about Aleppo, many areas. So I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. And in fact, it was the government that basically said initially it does not really want to focus on the main thrust of Geneva I, that is establishing a transitional authority with executive powers. And the idea was, for Allah Akhdar Ibrahimi, let's talk about humanitarian questions first. What this tells you is that there's a huge gulf between the opposition on the one hand and the government, and little progress has been achieved. And the gulf is, in fact, getting bigger, not smaller, between the two delegations.
Monza Akbik, the Syrian Deputy Foreign Minister, says that that rebel fighters are preventing women and children leaving Homs and not the Syrian army. Is he right?
No, it's the situation is that the regime is asking that women and children go out of Homs, and he's not allowing the humanitarian aid to go inside the city. Now, this is of course not acceptable offer by any way, because people they have the right to stay in their city. It's inhumane to push people out of their city out because of hunger. So our position is that the aid and the food should enter the city first, and then whoever wants to leave the city should have the freedom to leave, go and out in the city as they wish. The principle is that it is not allowed, according to humanitarian law, to block any food, even in time of war, to any place. And what the regime is doing, the starvation siege or starvation for submission, for people to submit, is going on in many areas in Syria. It's not only in Homs. We are starting with Homs as a confidence-building measure, and to start with somewhere. We have to start somewhere in order to make a progress in the humanitarian issue. And as you said, the very essence of this process is, of course, transition, political transition, and ending the dictatorship and starting transition toward democracy. And both issues are very important for us. So as today we are starting with the transition talks, we are going to continue doing parallel, trying to achieve progress in the humanitarian issues and trying also to work out the political issue at the same time. But of course, as you can see, that there's no progress whatsoever has been done so far, because of the regime refusal of doing anything.
Let's talk for a moment then about other areas of the country and the humanitarian operations needed there. How do you go about setting up corridors for humanitarian relief when one of the two parties agreeing to it there in Geneva isn't even fully represented at the talks? The political opposition in Geneva has no control, does it, over the more radical groups fighting on the ground in Syria?
If you mean Al-Qaeda, we are at war with Al-Qaeda. Now, the places where Al-Qaeda there, I think there's a problem with that, but we are fighting them, we're pushing them. We pushed ISIS from Idlib and Aleppo. Now they are in Raqqa. But we're not talking about these areas regarding the starvation siege. The starvation siege is going on in Homs, Old City, and in suburbs of Damascus. We have eastern Ghouta. It's a huge problem, and the number of people are in hundreds of thousands. The number of families remain in Old City of Homs are only 500 families. Most of the other families, they left because of the bombing, and they are living now in Al-War, which is another neighborhood in Homs. We have still a problem in Mardini because the number, the food that went inside was very little. It's not enough. We have a huge problem in Yarmouk. There was a report issued by United Nations Human Rights Commission on 17th of January confirming that the regime is blocking aid to Yarmouk in particular. Yeah. So we have problems in many areas regarding this starvation siege that the regime is doing.
Yeah. All right. For anybody who doesn't know the geography of Syria, of course, Homs, as we were hearing, they're not the only city under siege. Let's just show you where things stand at the moment. Government and rebel forces continue to tussle for control of areas in the capital, Damascus. More attention's now being given to the 45,000 people in the Yarmouk refugee camp. They've been besieged now for months with little access to food and medicine. In Aleppo, a city once considered a rebel stronghold, the government continues to make gains. In just the last week, Aleppo has come under intense bombardment by Assad forces, and there are almost daily skirmishes in other contested areas of the country like Deir ez-Zor and Idlib. And it's not only a fight against President Assad's troops. As we were hearing there, the end of last year saw fighting in Al-Raqqa between competing rebel groups on the ground. Robert Mardini of the International Red Cross, perhaps you could explain for us what a humanitarian corridor is and how it works.
Humanitarian corridors are always tricky because you have to enforce them and this happens by military means. So it has a huge deal of challenges. This is why we prefer at ICRC to speak of humanitarian pauses and consent by all sides to allow an impartial humanitarian work in a given location. And this is what we try to have during our discussions with all sides to the conflict in Syria. I must say that today it is challenging for us to have access to besieged areas, be it besieged by government forces or by armed opposition groups, and this is a matter of grave concern for us because we consider that in these areas the most vulnerable of the most vulnerable are people are lacking everything, ranging from food, water, medical supplies, and this is why we will reiterate on all parties to allow impartial flow of humanitarian aid and that Syrian Red Crescent volunteers and ICRC staff are able to enter there to be able to assess independently firsthand the humanitarian needs and be given the chance to address them.
Has it been possible for the Red Cross to get a truly accurate picture of the humanitarian situation in Syria?
Well, we have a 200-strong team based in Damascus. We work hand in hand with the Syrian Red Crescent volunteers. We were able to access Old City of Homs, unfortunately, only 1 year ago, and we have at that time the situation was already catastrophic, so you can imagine what it is today. But I think it's important to know that there are many more difficult areas in Syria, and there is a need for more than quick wins. There is a need for a more sustainable acceptance for humanitarian action. Our priorities are, of course, the needs of civilians in besieged areas. The other priority is the need for acceptance of impartial medical provision and supplies and services. And today, I think not only surgical needs are very acute, but also public health issues are a matter of concern. We see that there is a lot of epidemics that were eradicated in Syria that are appearing again, such as polio, leishmaniasis, and these are, of course, very severe indicators of the human cost of this conflict. Yeah. Another area of priority for us is to have access to detention places because we know that detainees are very vulnerable in normal times and all the more in situation of armed conflict, and access is needed across the board for all detainees in Syria.
Fawaz Gerges, can the humanitarian situation and the politics of Syria ever be separated?
I wish they could, but I don't think so. I think the humanitarian questions and the politics and the strategic questions are organically linked. And what you're seeing now is basically both questions are playing themselves out publicly. I think what we need to understand, and I think you have raised a very important question, of course we need to address humanitarian questions, but what we need to keep our focus on is the political strategic situation. How do you resolve the unfolding and the intensifying crisis inside Syria? How do you create enough trust, which does not exist? How do you basically minimize the gap that exists between the opposition and the Syrian government? And I think here the role of Russia and the United States is really very pivotal. I think if you want the Syrian government to really make some major concessions, you need Russia to come in. And also you need the United States to impress on the opposition the need to make some concessions as well. The problem, as you said, and you asked the question, a very important question, I don't think the Syrian government take the delegation that represents the opposition very seriously. The Syrian government says that the delegation not only it does not represent all political opposition inside and outside Syria, it does not really speak for the armed groups inside Syria. And we're not just talking about the Islamic State in Iraq and Sham. We're talking about al-Nusra and the Islamic Front. Most of the armed factions opposed any kind of political dialogue with the Assad regime.
I'm afraid we're going to have to end our discussion there, gentlemen. Thank you all for joining us today. In Geneva, Monza Akbik from the Syrian National Coalition. Also in Geneva, Robert Mardini from the International Committee of the Red Cross. And in London, Fawaz Gerges, Professor of Middle Eastern Politics at the London School of Economics. Gentlemen, thank you. A reminder that you can see this programme again and find many more at aljazeera.com. In Doha, I'm Adrian Finnegan. I'll see you again. Bye for now.